Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Satori podcast.
And welcome back to the Whole Soul podcast. So this is take 3. And we're going to talk about spirit versus ego. And for the third time, this is the show notes, which we are going to be referencing for the guide today in today's episode. So I wanted to talk about spirit versus ego. And recently I've been writing a lot about what is ego. So maybe I'll actually start there because it feels most relevant as of the last few days. So first of all, it's important that we talk about spirit versus ego because they're quite different. And you could consider spirit your higher self, and you could consider ego your primal self. I like to consider ego the animalistic brain, the reptilian brain, the primitive body. Like, you know, the body itself is a product of nature that we incarnate into, and that which incarnates into it is the spirit. So the spirit elsewhere, not of this world, chooses this world. That's you listening to this podcast chose to come to this world, and you incarnated into a body, which in this episode we're going to define to be the ego. An ego is just a byproduct of the body, in my opinion, and it is something that needs to be understood. But before we go further into that, do you have anything that you want to add to ego or spirit that came up? I feel like that was a nice surface level intro.
Yeah, I think that's good for now. I'll add on eventually.
Okay. So continuing on this thread, the ego is this sense of individuality or personhood, that which you consider to be your true self as this body. You say, me, my name is Taylor. I'm going to the store. I am an accountant, or I'm a businessman. When you're referencing this thing, I'm or me, you're referencing the ego. And this is just, we're just explaining this for simple speak. Obviously, like, I still use these words. I still use pronouns and whatnot. But the spirit is not tied to this body. It is connected to it, but it's not tied to it. Now, the ego's nature is one of reproduction and selfishness and making sure that it takes care of its own. And it's not common for the ego to be unconditionally loving and give away all that it has freely. This is why there's so much greed in the world, because there's typically big egos around the world. This is why wars happen, because people want more land, they want more money, they want more resources, etc. This is all a product of the ego.
And the ego loves identity, tying onto identities, titles. And that's a part of being human too, right? Like, you're not just a spirit that comes here and you're connected to your higher self from the start. You know, it's a process of recognizing the identities that you hold and then surrendering them, shedding and letting go of these identities so that you can realize the oneness and the wholeness that you are as a spirit.
Amen. That was incredible. That was great. And so that's what we're doing here, is the spiritual work is what you could call it, is to surrender these identities that you've tied to this name that you hold, such as Taylor, or the job that you hold, such as being a CEO or whatever. shedding these identities, it doesn't mean that you need to resign from being an accountant or a CEO, or it doesn't mean that you need to sell your BMW or your fancy Ferrari or whatever it is. You don't need to let go and surrender or sell your material possessions. You just need to surrender the attachment to them. And this is what it is to be a human being that is coming more into their spiritual body and less into their human body.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful to realize that you are not this body, that you are a spirit having your soul having a human experience. And I feel like in the spiritual community, there's this almost like shame that you feel sometimes for having desires or wanting to live a certain way or have a certain standard of living, because people will call you out and be like, oh, like those are egoic desires.
Yeah.
But again,
gaslight.
And like they'll gaslight you for wanting to have certain things.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to have something or having those desires. I think it's just a part of this human experience. And yeah, I think it's important to recognize like when it's truly coming from like egoic desires and wanting to have validation or wanting to be seen versus what you want to just like improve your life or like what makes you feel good in this human experience.
What it comes up for me is the difference between desires and the alternative preferences. Mm-hmm. So it's like, wow, I really desire something. It's typically coming from this egoic place of where you're feeling this sense of attachment to this thing. And if you don't get it, dear Lord, it's going to drive you into suffering and pain. A preference is more, that would be really nice. And if the Lord would allow such a thing to occur in which this beautiful home comes to fruition, amazing. Yeah. Something you said in the earlier takes was spirit and the synonyms. Do you want to touch on that? 'Cause I really like that.
Yeah. So I find that a lot of people find it triggering when you say God, because, you know, there's like religious indoctrination. And for me, for example, I grew up Roman Catholic, and the word God was very triggering to me for a long time because I just did not resonate with Catholicism and the church. Yeah. And there's just such a negative connotation towards God. But yeah, there's different synonyms like spirit, source, creator, the highest. Yeah. And those are all just pointing to the same thing, which is the infinite, the ineffable, what our minds cannot comprehend.
Let's go through all the synonyms. You said a lot.
I did. I said spirit.
Spirit, God, infinity, divinity.
Divinity is a good one.
Reverentially capitalized. Self, reverentially capitalized. Yes. The funny thing about God is that you can reverentially capitalize anything and reference God. So I could say the table. And if I reverentially capitalize it, it's a reference to God because God is in the table. And at the same time, the nameless one has no names, therefore it can have all names. It's quite the dichotomy and paradox, but yeah.
You said God is in the table. God is the table.
Is the table. Yeah. God is.
But also in the table.
The table, in the table, outside of the table.
Everywhere.
All around the table. But the classic ones are the ones that you just mentioned, the ones that I just mentioned too.
Yeah. And I feel like in the spiritual plant medicine community, spirit is used widely. In like Christianity, it's like the Lord and God. The O Lord.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Christ.
That's a funny thread.
That's a funny thread.
Because people think Christ is God. And it's like...
I thought that until like 2 years ago or something.
And it's like, yes, Christ is from the heavenly domain and incarnated once as a human being. But what Christ is actually is the probably most highest form of what God could be as a human being. That is what Christ is.
Do you want to touch on levels of consciousness?
Yeah, levels of consciousness is this beautiful, the map of consciousness is something that was created by Dr. David R. Hawkins. He has a series of books, 12, I think, to be exact. And I highly recommend Googling The Map of Consciousness by Dr. David R. Hawkins, because it's a scale ranging from 0 to 1,000, in which there are 1,000 levels of consciousness, but it's a scale that, how is it? It's got a multiplier on it. What is that called? The mathematics thing?
Power of.
If you move up 1 point, let's say you're at level 500 of whatever in the level of consciousness, but you move to 501, it's 501 to the power of 10.
It's an exponent.
It's an exponent. So it's exponential. The scale is exponential,
Yes.
right? So moving up 1 point is massive. So it's kind of an overview, but it's so helpful because Jesus Christ calibrated at 1,000 along with Buddha and Krishna and several of the other avatars, of which many people get into serious debates and triggers around, no, Krishna is the Lord. And then it's like, no,
yeah,
Jesus
like,
is
Buddha's
the Lord.
The way.
It's like, no, Buddha and
They're
Tao,
all the way.
like Buddhism is the way. And religious doctrine and religions in general are formed around avatars that realized the self,
Capital
Spirit, God, and spoke of such a high truth that everybody just formed a religion around them. And then they kind of get lost in the person, not the teachings. And Christ also said that. He said, pay no attention to me as a teacher, but more so the teachings.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing.
I have a good thread we could go into.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually about religion and the separation that happens with religion. And I think that really ties into the ego, because different groups like Christians think, oh no, this is the way, Christ is the way. And then Buddhists will be like, no, this is the way. And then there's so much separation that religion causes because everyone's like, no, this is the way. No, this is the way.
Yeah.
And then it causes separation when the reality is that we're all one.
Yeah.
And it's all the same. Like, it's all pointing to the same thing.
Yeah.
There's just different philosophies and teachers and teachings.
And it's not so much that religion causes it, but more so the people behind it that believe so strongly in it that they can't have the open-mindedness to realize the truth within all the other religions.
Or they also distort it and pervert the truth.
Yeah.
Like if you think about Christians and like what they did with Jesus and like the way they distort his teachings and make the world think that Christians like hate gay people or something.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of distortion that comes out
of
of it. It's super unfortunate to see how, and that's a product of the ego and greed and control. And what's really funny, and I don't know much about the history of the Roman Empire and all that, but Christ gets crucified, and then the Roman Catholic Church is basically formed around the being that they crucified. I could be totally wrong in this, but the point is
don't
that
quote us.
Don't quote me in this. But the point is that basically the church ran the world. It was all about the church, and
Roman
it was
Catholics,
at the forefront of that which was quote unquote most powerful. And it was used in such a vicious way, like people coming to the Aztecs and just like destroying their culture. We don't care about your great spirit. You're going to believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Even in the Amazon.
It's incredible. So that's called, what is that called? Not pilgrimage. Is
colonization.
Colonization, but in the name of God, quote unquote, is what's gone on. And that's the projections of the ego and the distortions that we're talking of.
A really good example of this was the movie that we watched. Do you remember the name of it?
Yeah, The Serpent or something.
The Serpent. Something like
with
that.
serpent.
We'll quote it in the show notes because that's a really good example of colonization in the name of Christ.
Yeah.
But
and this
so
goes on
perverted and distorted.
All the time. Killing in the name of, like, I just wrote about this yesterday. Shoe bombers are people that, commit suicide and kill other people in the process. Oftentimes do so in the name of their God.
Mm-hmm.
But that stems out of a projection, just a belief in falsehood around what God is and how to get to heaven. And it's like, damn, dude. And a lot of people think that's insanity and that's crazy. And it's like, no, that's just the ego. the ego is so susceptible to being easily programmed that, unfortunately, if you grew up in a cult that believes that the way to heaven is by blowing yourself up with a shoe bomb and killing as many people as you can, that you'll go to a heaven with like 22 virgins or whatever these beliefs are that they have, you will do that.
Yeah.
Because you grew up with everybody who's doing it. And they're like, oh, this is the way.
Yeah.
And so it's like so difficult for a lot of people to come to this realization that that's okay. Like, don't freak out about this. Is just an episode on the Animal Planet where people are doing what they think is best, even though it is absolutely, from your perspective of a higher truth, the worst. But it's because of the ego and how easily it is to be programmed.
And then when their body dies and they go on to the spirit realm, they see like, holy shit, whoa, what was I doing? Or
right.
Not what was I doing, but damn, what a lifetime.
And they get to have that lesson.
Yeah, and they get to see the distortions of that lifetime.
I'm just adding this to write this in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I think that's funny because sometimes I'll write like, you know, if someone's an atheist and it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, but spend your whole life trying to disprove God, and you will find out upon death that you had a spirit.
Yeah.
And Hawkins was an atheist, a rabid atheist, and that was so beautiful because in his revelation of finding God, he could then out debate every atheist on planet Earth, and that's why he's so incredible at speaking to God, is because he was a raging atheist.
Yeah.
And then he woke up and was like, whoa.
His story is really inspiring.
Super cool.
Yeah. You guys should check out Dr. David R. Hawkins.
He's the best.
He's great. He's great.
There's other aspects of the spirit that we could go into.
I was going to say, if you don't believe in God, this morning I went for a walk down the beach and was just chilling on the rocks by the ocean. And yeah, I closed my eyes and just dropped into meditation. And within like 5 to 10 minutes, I just realized that I'm loving awareness and I'm witnessing what's going on, and I'm not my body.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that moment when you're meditating and you're just so present, you realize that you are just awareness. You're just the witness experiencing this human experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's such a big, what is it called? Like that's such a good example for people that don't believe in God, to just like tune in, meditate, and then like realize like I am the awareness. I'm not this body.
Yeah.
Because when you really tune in, you do realize that you're not the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And tuning in is typically easiest when you're secluded with nature.
By yourself.
With nature.
Yeah.
If you put yourself in a box, or like you stay late after hours at your 9 to 5 in a cubicle somewhere in New York just to feel in, like try to tune in, like you might get there, but you should probably go to the park.
Yeah.
And try to like feel into this spirit thing.
Yeah.
I love what you said, and it brought me to this beautiful thing of, it's like kind of, let's do it. It's a short little meditation thing, and maybe you can add to it. But if you are listening, you can just close your eyes, and
not if you're driving.
not if you're driving. So please don't be driving. Somewhere safe where you can close your eyes. And if you close your eyes, you clearly have an awareness of being something. But let's just forget the body and forget any past memories of things that have gone on, or any future ideas of things that you're trying to bring forth to the present through whatever effort or manifestation, whatever you want to call it. So we're forgetting the past, we're forgetting the future. Where you end up is the infinite present moment, the here now, which is the only place that there actually is. So this brings us to the awareness that time is a construct. It's a idea. It's man-made. Mathematics and numbers, they're just, we made them up. They're really useful. But they don't really exist per se. See, this awareness that I'm speaking of right now is not subject to past or future. You can't count it with years. There's no days. And so when you feel into this awareness, you imagine, is it something like, as this awareness, do you have the ability to touch something or smell something or see something when you go through all the senses? You might think, yeah, of course I can smell something. But I said, remember, like in the beginning, we're going to forget that we're a body for a moment and just be awareness as awareness. You're transcending the senses of the body, in a sense, and you're becoming the non-linear, infinite self, spirit, that which you truly are. And this is what you're tuning into when you go to nature, is you're just forgetting about the past, forgetting about the future, tuning into the moment. And in doing this, the mind begins to quiet down. And it's okay if thoughts come up, you just let go of them. You don't acknowledge them. You consider them like pigeons in a park. You don't feed them. You just let them be. Ignore the pigeons in the park. And you come to this place. And it's a very peaceful place where you feel just so calm and centered and here now. And actually for me, like when I feel into this right now, there's a slight degree of love where my heart feels more open. And I think that answers the loving awareness piece. Not just awareness. You are loving awareness. Because God is also infinitely loving. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, when you're in nature and you tune in to the here and now, you realize that all of the trees, all of the plants, all of the animals understand that they are connected to God. They don't even think about it. They know. They're just fully in the now doing what they're meant to be doing. And they're kind of like a leaf in the wind, you know? Whereas our mind and our ego, let's say we're looking at a sunset. The animals don't look at a sunset because they are the sunset.
Wow, I love that.
But we look at the sunset as if we're separate from it. We're like, wow.
It's so beautiful.
Look at that. And it is.
It is.
It is. And it's a beautiful experience in the human experience. But to also realize that we are not separate from the sunset, that we are the sunset, is such a helpful realization to recognize the oneness that you are.
And that same beauty that we can see in a sunset that might make you cry, as you did like 3 days ago, can be found in the grass on your front lawn. Wow. And that's what you're referencing. It's not like animals all sit down on the hill to watch the sunset.
Yeah, they're not like having a discussion. They're just doing what they're doing what they're meant to be doing.
Yeah, they're in their dharma.
They're in their dharma, literally.
And this is so beautiful because like innately nature is so tapped in. Nature is divinity as divinity, etc. Humans, we have this veil of ignorance that we pass through in the incarnation process. And it seems to be there because of the mind. The mind is almost too smart for its own good. And it's so cool. So it allows you to come into this realm where it's like you think you're an individual. And like you think you're your own shit and you're like, I'm the shit. I'm like, I am God. That is the nature of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I am God. And you look at it on a grand scale and you see what happens to some people who actually get access to power with a strong ego.
Like Hitler.
And they try to take over the world. And they try to kill like half the people in the process. And they don't care if they kill half the people in the process because they're God and it doesn't matter.
And they think they're doing God's work.
And sometimes they also think they're doing God's work, which is even scarier.
Bizarre.
In a certain context. But so the mind comes up and the mind is the ego. And to understand the mind and to understand the ego is this one and the same thing. And it helps you to transcend it because by merely understanding it, you've dissembled it. You've been able to step outside of the box of personhood and into the infinite nonlinear realm of awareness.
Yes. And awareness is key.
Yeah.
If you can wake up every day and remind yourself that you are a soul, you are an infinite being having a human experience, that'll keep you grounded and so aware of that.
Yeah.
And that really helps in life.
Yeah.
Helps you stay grounded and connected to what you are and who you are.
Yeah.
As a being.
Yeah. That is why the path to enlightenment is so straight and narrow. Because that's it. It's just constantly being in this place of centering your focus into the macro and not the micro, where you take the lens and realize that you are all of it, not just a body. And if you can hold that awareness, you're surrendering your attachments to everything. You're emptying the mind and you're becoming empty. And that's the process. Anything else, I don't know what you're doing.
You know those videos where it starts off with a person and then it zooms out into like the country, the planet, and like the solar system, and then the galaxies, and then like further and further and further out. It's like we make our problems so fucking big in everyday life.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's nothing. Like our ego makes it so big, but the reality is that none of it really matters.
None of it really matters.
But like, of course, it matters to us in this human experience because, you know,
feels so
it's
real.
Our life. It feels so real.
Yeah.
And it is. It's real shit, you know, for the human and this human experience. But on a soul level.
Yeah. On a soul level, it's like if your kid died, he didn't really die.
He just changed forms.
Your human's going to grieve that.
Yeah, totally.
But your spirit's like chilling up there, talking to him.
And that's why this human experience can feel so rough sometimes because it's so dense.
Yeah.
There's so much density here.
And why is it dense?
You know, I feel that it is dense because...
No, I agree.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to...
For me, I feel the density because the average human being calibrates very low. The average human being is in such a state of separation.
That's it.
Like you said, they're in that box of like where their problems are so big that they forget the macrocosm.
Macrocosm.
Like they forget the big picture. They become so obsessed with a dot on the painting, which is them, that they forget that they're the infinite canvas.
Yeah. It's because they're so hung up on their ego, you know? That's another thing why it's so dense. Identity.
Attachments to identity.
And that's so limited, which is why it feels so dense and contracting. It's like, this is not expansive in any way because it's not connected to oneness. It's not connected to the truth.
Yeah.
Truth of what is. Reverentially capitalized truth.
Yeah.
Capital T.
Capital T. Where were you going with the density thing?
I don't know, to be honest. I lost my train of thought.
It was really beautiful. Yeah. So go ahead.
I do remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were talking about like the zoom out.
Yeah.
And just like the macrocosm and then this human experience and how we get so obsessed with our problems and focused on that. I said that's why it feels dense, because we're so focused on this life and we lose sight of the big picture.
Yeah.
That's why I said it, but
I love that.
just
I
to
love
summarize.
that. So what came up for me is like, how does someone balance, like it's insane to imagine you're like a mom or a dad with kids, both husband and wife or partners have jobs, or even if you don't have a partner at the time and you have kids, like how do you balance having a job and taking care of kids and all of this and also doing the quote unquote spiritual work at the same time?
Yeah.
I love this question. I have a good thread, but I want to hear what you think and feel into it.
This is why most people aren't doing the work. Because, well, first of all, there's just a lack of awareness of it.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, like how does someone balance all the day-to-day life? There's so much going on. They're so in it. Now they're hearing this podcast and they're like, I got to do all this spiritual stuff now. And it's like, oh my God, like this feels like it's so difficult.
You know, I feel like it's not about like doing the spiritual work. I feel like even just having the awareness and being self-aware of your words, your thoughts, your actions, how you treat yourself, how you treat everyone around you. And yeah, just being aware of like, am I coming from a place of love, or am I being hard on myself, or am I maybe not treating my friends or my partner or my kids in the most loving way? And yeah, like once you start becoming more aware, you can start to see where in life you are not being in the most loving state. Yeah. And then you can attempt to start to slowly bring more loving awareness into those areas of life, because it's not all going to happen at once. Yeah. That's why it's called doing the work, because it's a process. Yeah. And it's going to go on for your whole life. It never ends. And that's where the evolution comes in. That's why we're like always in a state of growing. We're always growing. Yeah. It's infinite.
Yeah. I love that. Here's my take. If you have a lot of stuff going on and you're like, man, how do I enter this loving awareness thing? It really, first of all, it doesn't require any work. It is a process of surrender. You take a yin-like stance to life.
What is yin?
Yin. So yin and yang. Yin is more like surrender, all good. Like someone runs into the back of my car and I'm just like, it's okay. Like don't just send me your insurance papers, whatever. We'll figure it out. Yang is like, oh my, like I really got to get this done. Like it's more just like I'm force. I'm gonna come in and do this. And
so also I want to add, yin is more feminine, yang is more masculine.
You could say, yeah. Even though what comes up for me is like, what is gender? And like we both have feminine, masculine.
Yes, but in terms of
within your beingness and
opposites, you know.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about doing more work, because it's just an awareness thing. It doesn't necessarily require more work. It actually decreases your workload in a sense, because you come into a more loving awareness by simply having greater awareness of what is going on in your own beingness. And if you're feeling super triggered by some micro thing that just occurred at the office, or like some person that cut in front of you in traffic, like that is the opportunity to just enter loving awareness and not freak out and get so angry and swear and curse the person. the work is 24/7. You can't avoid it. So it's not more. It's not an additional thing on your plate. It's just what you're already doing with a heightened awareness.
Yeah, I think it's contemplation.
It is that. Introspection. Contemplation.
You know, and people say they don't have time for spirit or source or God or the Lord. But, you know, I think even 10 minutes a day will really take off so much weight.
Oh, for sure.
From everything else. Because when you're disconnected, you're literally suffocating yourself, and things seem to be so overwhelming, and you get so drained, and you're so tired, and your life force just gets sucked away so easily. But connecting to spirit is like your plug back into your life force energy and your force, your life force. And it's so important. And I feel like that's such a big epidemic right now everywhere, but especially in the US with hustle culture. I mean, even the other week I was talking to one of my brothers and he was like, yeah, I'm so tired. Like I don't know. Like I just took all these antibiotics.
Exhausted.
I've been sick. And I'm like, well, have you made any space for yourself to just like chill and relax and create space to like connect deeply? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, of course you're going to be tired. You're not creating any space to like get your life force back. You're so disconnected, even from nature.
Yeah. Yeah. You really have to give yourself some time.
Even if it's like 5 to 10 minutes a day to start, it's something.
Yeah.
You know?
And I actually feel like for me, it started when I was in this place of constantly thinking, and I was so like left brain, rational intellectualization around everything, overthinking everything, not really in my heart at all, not really connected at all. In a certain sense, with awareness, I was kind of just like a robot going through the matrix, the world, having no awareness of a spirit or anything. But what started changing, what I did have, which was really helpful, was this eagerness to learn and this like learning mindset that I believed in. Like I have to have an open mind and I need to be able to learn because I don't know everything. And I stumbled across Hawkins from a friend of a friend. You should read Hawkins, Power versus Force. Bought that book. And it just absolutely sent me into the infinite. And I bought all his books and read all of them. And then I started listening to like all his YouTube videos. And that was a form of meditation almost for me because I didn't even really believe in meditation at that time that much. So I also feel that for Satori and for Whole Soul of just how by just listening to this, you are rewiring the neural pathways in your brain to be able to introspect and step outside of your ego animalistic brain to be able to look at everything going on from a higher perspective. So I think this is also really helpful.
Totally.
And meditation is also great. I feel like that would be a nice supplemental thing also because meditation is just the practice of just simply being and not feeding the pigeons the infinite thoughts that come up that you can't control.
Yeah, I think meditation's like the most important.
The thing.
And then like supplementing with podcasts and books and things that will make you think differently or like help you see from another lens or another perspective, a greater perspective. Not just your limited perspective that you see from right now. Because I mean, we both had that. Everyone has that until they step out of their own box and they look for more knowledge or they're open to learn, which, we're always going to be students of life. And we're always going to want to learn more. There's so much to learn.
Yeah. And in what came up while you're saying that was in spiritual speak, we use the word the awakening.
The awakening.
And that is just a reference of having gone from being ego, where there's no concept or understanding of what spirit is, or no real strong belief or sense of actuality into it, to, wow, this is the thing. Oh my God, I can't believe that I was just an animal walking around reacting to my environment thinking.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the template too. Like that is the programming and conditioning that we grow up with in school.
Yeah.
Like it's normal to be disconnected and think that there is one way or maybe two ways to go about life.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, that's not the truth. But most people will go down that one path and think that they have to live life in this certain way.
Yeah.
And yeah, most times that's pretty disconnected from God, spirit, source.
Yeah. Yeah, I was feeling into how school doesn't do much except point you down a career path. And really, like, that doesn't help that much.
And that is like the highest.
Yeah, they're like, this is, you. If you're a doctor,
you're
man,
set.
you're doing
You're doing it.
You're not only making a lot of money, you're doing the Lord's work. You are noble and highly revered for not only your intelligence, but your ability to save lives. Yeah. That's like, I remember like doctor, lawyer, dentist, like these super classic paths, and
Real estate
God
agent.
bless the people who do that.
Yeah, totally.
Amen. But also, if school could just teach that, oh yeah, and there's this thing called the spirit. Yeah, you should be aware of this too as you go into your journey.
Totally.
And that's why we started the podcasts.
Yeah. In reality, we're just little babies learning right now and coming into these quote unquote awakenings. And yeah, just starting to lead our life from a different way.
Mm-hmm. An important thread that just came up for me is, well, actually, I want to read this page, and then, the thread that came up is that a lot of people sometimes say, kill the ego,
or the ego is the enemy.
Or the ego is the enemy. There's a whole book by Ryan Holiday, which is a great book, by the way. I've read it, and it's fantastic, but don't disagree with the ego is the enemy thing. It is, but it isn't. So let's talk about it. The ego is just a part of what it is to be human. Simple. You can't kill it. What you can do is you can tame it and control it by stepping outside of it and seeing it for what it is. It's just part of what it is to be human.
And realizing that you are not it.
Yeah, and not feeling the guilt or the shame that comes up with what it is to be human despite having an awareness of being spirit. Because that comes up a lot in the spiritual community that you were talking about earlier. It's just like people become so quote unquote spiritual, they begin to negate the human experience and say that like, oh man, like, no, like watching football, duh, like, or like sports, television, or gambling, or whatever. Just they start to just
it gets so extreme.
Judge aspects of perfection.
Yeah.
That is divinity. And we've been dealing with that.
Uh-huh.
Oh wow, interesting. I wonder if it turned off. Hopefully not. Did you hear the silence? It just like went really silent. Well, we'll read this page. Those two cameras are still recording, right? Is this one?
Yeah.
Cool. I want to read this page, and then I'm happy to wrap it up after.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So, body, this is written this morning. Body is hardware. Mind is software. You are exclusively neither. My child, the body you incarnated into is akin to the hardware of a computer, while the mind is akin to the software or operating system of the computer. Just as when you get a new computer, there's really only some default software, so it is upon your birth in that as a baby, you know how to cry for attention, whether that be due to wanting food or because you're afraid of something or because you're simply uncomfortable. But in order for you to actually learn language or mathematics or anything complex that's more advanced, you have to be taught by someone or something. And although this may seem obvious, there are very few who actually introspect upon this, while even fewer who begin to question their beliefs. Humans are very easily programmed, especially when the programming begins at a young age. as the mind is most empty at this time. The horrors of mankind can be largely attributed to the ego's susceptibility to believing in falsehood. Hence why the shoe bomber does what he does. It's not that he's a bad guy. It's simply that his understanding of getting to heaven is false. Therefore, we can have compassion and be understanding of all who commit horrors. As my son of Nazareth said prior to being crucified, "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they do." By understanding the nature of the ego, we understand the nature of the world, allowing for your innate inner peace to be undisturbed by fallacious programs of your mind, which are telling you how the world ought to be, rather than accepting its infinite innate perfection. Today, I ask that you ponder upon your programming. Today I ask that you ponder upon programming that does not serve you and let it go. Gloria and Excelsius Dio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So you got to be careful because everybody is programming you all the time. And this is why there's this one quote of like, stand guard at the door of your mind.
Uh-huh.
It's like, got to be really careful.
Got to be very careful
about what you hear and what you let fully in, because that thing might come to bite you in the ass later.
Discernment.
Yeah. And so you're so blessed if you come across high truths.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. That was so beautiful.
Yay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think we should wrap up.
Let's do a prayer.
Hmm.
You want to start?
Yes.
Okay.
May all beings realize that they are not the ego, they are not the mind, but they are a whole soul experiencing this human life and experience. And that the exact body and avatar that you chose that is listening to this podcast right now is perfect. You chose this life, and you are not a victim of your circumstance. You can change your mind. You can change your life. And yeah, amen.
Amen. Wow, that was beautiful. I love how you tied in the podcast name. I will have set the intention to do something similar. To thee, O Lord, we give thanks for this incredible podcast and those who have spent the time to tune in. And we ask that all those who listened are given the opportunity to ascend their current level of consciousness and enter into a stronger sense of loving awareness that will bring them greater levels of peace and harmony in their day-to-day lives as they go through this human experience. And may it be so that some of these beings may come to the point of fully realizing their whole soul, thus experiencing Satori.
I love it.
Amen.
Amen. Aho.
Yay, we did it.
We love you guys so much.
Love you.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you're still here, you're a real one. Yeah, we'll link whatever we talked about in the show notes.
Yeah.
Make sure to rate this podcast, Satori.
Oh, that'd be really helpful.
The Whole Soul.
If you like this podcast.
If you found value, if it inspired you or brought any new awarenesses to you. Yeah,
share.
We would greatly appreciate a rating. And if you're watching this on YouTube, maybe a like, subscribe.
Or a comment with ideas around future episode topics.
What you'd like us to talk about more.
Yeah.
Share it with your friends, fam, whoever.
Yay.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Me.
We love you. Bye-bye.
We love you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.